What happens when the man who left you for a perfect life is forced to watch you live a life beyond his wildest dreams? This isn't just a story about heartbreak. It's about the brutal, beautiful, and often shocking way the universe settles its debts. It's the story of Marie Cutrona, a woman cast aside for not being ambitious enough, and how she found herself in the arms of a man so powerful his shadow eclipsed everything her ex-husband ever hoped to be. We're going to follow a twisted path of jealousy obsession, and the moment a scorned ex-wife didn't just get revenge, she became the one thing her replacement could never be genuinely happy. Stick with me, because you are about to hear how one woman's quiet dignity became the loudest sound in the room, shattering a picture-perfect facade and exposing the ugly truth hiding behind it. The divorce decree had felt like a death certificate for a life she once thought was hers. But the true funeral, the final shovelful of dirt on the coffin of her past, arrived via a blindingly bright Instagram post. It was a photo of her ex-husband, Liam Sterling, on one knee on a picturesque cliffside in Positano. Before him, his girlfriend of 18 months, Isabella Thorne, had her manicured hands clasped over her mouth in a perfect pantomime of surprise. The caption penned by Liam was a dagger coated in sugar. She said, "Yes, from the moment I met Isabella, I knew what it meant to be with a partner who inspires you to conquer the world. She is grace, ambition, beauty, and strength all rolled into one perfect soul. I can't wait to build our empire together. This is what life is supposed to feel like." Every word was a carefully chosen missile aimed directly at her heart. Ambition. Conquer the world. Empire. These were the words he had used against her in their final soul-crushing arguments. He had called her complacent. He said she was content with their small life, while he was destined for more. Their life hadn't felt small to her. It had felt warm, full of inside jokes, lazy Sunday mornings, and the quiet comfort of knowing someone's rhythm as well as your own. She had supported his career in finance, hosting dinner parties for his bosses, and proofreading his presentations until her eyes burned. She put her own passion, illustrative design, on the back burner, telling herself there would be time for it later after he made partner. But later never came. He made partner, and suddenly their cozy two-bedroom home felt like a cage to him. The women he met at corporate galas were CEOs, founders, women who wore power suits like a second skin, women like Isabella. Isabella Thorne was by all accounts flawless. A Wharton graduate who had launched her own successful marketing firm by 30, she was a symphony of polished excellence. Her hair was a glossy, impossible shade of raven black. Her body was honed by a personal trainer, and her social media was a curated gallery of charity galas, keynote speeches, and 10-day detox retreats in Bali. She was everything Marie wasn't. Marie was quiet. She was commanding. Marie preferred old books to boardrooms. Her idea of a perfect evening was a glass of wine and a sketchbook, not networking over canapes. Liam had not just left her, he had upgraded. He made sure the world knew it. His Instagram, once filled with their goofy hiking selfies and pictures of the dog they had shared, was now a shrine to Isabella. Photos of them clinking champagne glasses on a yacht. Photos of them in matching designer ski gear in Aspen. Photos of her looking pensively out a window with a caption from Liam about her brilliant mind. Her life, in contrast, felt like a grainy black-and-white film. She lived in a small apartment across town, the kind with thin walls where you could hear your neighbors' arguments. She had taken a stable but uninspiring graphic design job at a mid-level insurance company, creating soulless brochures and web banners. It paid the bills, but it chipped away at her spirit with every sterile corporate logo she designed. Her friends, especially her best friend Chloe, tried their best. "He's a narcissist, Marie," she'd say over a bottle of cheap Pinot Noir. "He needs a trophy, not a partner. You're better off." Marie knew she was right logically, but logic is a cold comfort when your heart is shivering. She would scroll through Liam's life, a masochistic ritual of self-torture. She'd see the comments from their old mutual friends. "So happy for you both. She's perfect for you, Liam. Couple goals. Each one felt like a small betrayal, a confirmation that she was the forgotten prequel to his epic love story. That night, staring at the engagement photo, the weight of it all crushed her. The ring on Isabella's finger was a monstrous diamond, a starburst of light that mocked the simple, delicate band Liam had given her years ago. She thought back to his proposal. It had been in their favorite park, a picnic blanket under a willow tree. It had been simple, private, and she had thought perfect. Now it felt cheap, inadequate. She threw her phone onto the sofa and curled into a ball, the silence of her apartment amplifying the roaring inadequacy in her head. She wasn't just heartbroken anymore. She felt erased. Liam had successfully rewritten their history, casting her as the lackluster first draft, and Isabella as the polished final masterpiece. And as she fell into a fitful sleep, she had no idea that her own story was about to take a turn so sharp and so spectacular that it would make Liam and Isabella's perfect life look like a cheap imitation. The universe was indeed about to settle its debts. The weeks following the engagement announcement were a blur of forced smiles and quiet desperation. She threw herself into her work at the insurance company, the monotony a welcome distraction. But her soul was starving. Her sketchbook lay gathering dust. Her pencils felt foreign in her hand. The creative spark that had once been her defining feature was now a pilot light flickering precariously close to extinguishing. One Saturday, determined to break the spell of her own misery, she decided to do something for the old Marie. Not the divorced, heartbroken Marie, but the one who existed before Liam. The one who could lose an entire afternoon in the hushed halls of an art museum, who found beauty in the cracks of a weathered stone, who believed that art could save your soul. She went to the Atherton, a grand old public library in the city's historic district, a place she hadn't visited in years. It was a cathedral of knowledge with soaring vaulted ceilings, the warm, comforting scent of aging paper and sunbeams that slanted through the towering, arched windows, illuminating dancing dust motes. She found a secluded carrel in the fine arts section, surrounded by heavy tomes on Renaissance painters and modern sculptors. For the first time in a long time, she opened her sketchbook. Her hand felt stiff, her lines uncertain. She started sketching the ornate carvings on the wooden bookshelf opposite her. It was clumsy at first, but slowly the old rhythm returned. The feel of the graphite gliding across the page, the focus required to capture a shadow, the way the world narrowed to just her and the paper. It was a form of meditation. She was so engrossed that she didn't notice the man who had taken a seat at the adjacent table until he spoke. "That's a beautiful study of light and shadow," a low, calm voice said. She jumped, startled. She looked up to see a man who seemed both out of place and perfectly at home in the quiet library. He was dressed in a simple, dark gray Henley and tailored trousers, no suit, no tie, but the fabric had a quality that spoke of quiet expense. He had kind eyes, a warm shade of hazel, and a light dusting of stubble on a strong jawline. But it was his focus that was most striking. He was looking at her sketchbook not with polite curiosity, but with genuine, intelligent interest. Embarrassed, she instinctively moved to close the book. "Oh, it's just a doodle. I'm a bit out of practice." "Please don't," he said, holding up a hand. "I'm sorry for startling you. I didn't mean to intrude. It's just, you have a real talent for capturing texture. The way you've rendered the grain of that oak is remarkable." No one had commented on her art with such specific insight in years. Liam used to just say, "That's nice, honey," before turning back to his laptop. She felt a flush creep up her neck. "Thank you. I used to draw all the time." "What stopped you?" he asked, his gaze gentle, not probing. The entire sordid story of her marriage threatened to spill out. She caught herself and offered a sanitized version. "Life, I guess. A job, a marriage. It got complicated." "I understand that." He nodded, a flicker of something knowing in his eyes. "My name is Julian, by the way." "Marie," she replied, the name sounding a little stronger in this new context. He didn't ask for her number. He didn't try to flatter her. They just talked. For nearly an hour they sat in that quiet corner of the library and spoke about art. He knew about the Dutch masters, the Impressionists, and even some of the contemporary digital artists she admired. He talked about how architecture was a form of public art, and how the design of a building could influence the mood of a city block. He listened, truly listened, asking questions that made her dig deeper into her own thoughts. It was the most engaging conversation she'd had in years. It was effortless. When he finally looked at his watch, he seemed genuinely disappointed. "I have a meeting I can't get out of," he said. "But Marie, I would be remiss if I didn't ask if I could see you again. Perhaps we could visit the art gallery next weekend. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the new Rothko exhibit." Her heart did a strange little flutter. It wasn't the wild, chaotic beat she'd felt with Liam. It was a calmer, more hopeful rhythm. For the first time, she wasn't being asked out because she was someone's +1 or because a friend was setting her up. This man, Julian, was interested in her mind, in her passion. "I'd like that very much," she said, a real unforced smile reaching her eyes. They exchanged numbers. As he walked away, she watched him go, a tall, unassuming figure who moved with a quiet confidence. There was no pretense, no peacocking. He was just Julian. She stayed in the library for another hour, but she wasn't sketching anymore. She was replaying their conversation the way he'd looked at her, the way he'd made her feel seen. A tiny seed of hope had been planted in the barren soil of her heart. It had nothing to do with revenge or getting over Liam. It had everything to do with the possibility of becoming Marie again. As she packed up her sketchbook, she felt a lightness she hadn't felt since before the divorce. The echo of Liam's perfect life was still there, but for the first time she could hear another sound beginning to rise, the quiet, hopeful melody of her own. The date with Julian was better than she could have imagined. They spent 4 hours at the gallery, not just looking at the paintings, but truly seeing them. He would point out the subtle color transitions in a Mark Rothko canvas, and she would explain the emotional theory behind them. He listened with an intensity that made her feel like the most interesting person in the world. Afterwards, they went to a small, unassuming Italian restaurant he knew, tucked away on a side street, where the owner greeted him by name. Over pasta and red wine, she learned more about him. He ran a small tech company, as he put it. He spoke passionately about data ethics and creating user-centric software. He was intelligent, witty, and profoundly decent. There were no red flags, no hints of the arrogance she'd grown so accustomed to with Liam. He asked about her job, and when she described the soul-crushing corporate work, he didn't pity her. He said, "It sounds like a temporary stop. Someone with your eye can't be happy designing insurance pamphlets forever." He made her feel like her dreams were not just valid, but inevitable. Their second date led to a third and then a fourth. Within a month, Julian had become a steady, comforting presence in her life. He encouraged her to start a portfolio of her personal work, the intricate, nature-inspired illustrations that she truly loved. He even bought her a professional-grade tablet to help her transition into digital art. An investment in a brilliant artist. He'd called it brushing off her protests. She was starting to feel whole again. The obsessive checking of Liam's social media had dwindled to nothing. She was too busy living her own life to be a spectator in his. Then came the collision. Julian had booked a reservation for their 1-month anniversary at Aria, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. It was the kind of place with a 6-month waiting list, a place Liam had always talked about but could never get into. She felt a pang of nervousness as she dressed, choosing a simple but elegant emerald green dress. Julian had told her to wear whatever made her feel beautiful. When she met him there, he looked devastatingly handsome in a tailored navy blue suit. The way he looked at her when she walked in made her feel like a queen. The restaurant was stunning, all dark wood, soft lighting, and hushed conversations. They were led to a discreet corner booth. They were halfway through their appetizers, laughing about a story from his college days, when she felt a sudden chill. She glanced up, and her blood ran cold. Standing by the host stand, waiting to be seated, were Liam and Isabella. Of course. This was exactly the kind of place they would be. It was a stage, and they were the lead actors in their grand performance of success. Isabella was wearing a stark white dress that looked like it was sculpted onto her body, a stark contrast to her softer green. She held her head high, surveying the room with an air of ownership. Liam stood beside her, his hand possessively on the small of her back, a smug look on his face. For a moment she wanted to slide under the table. The old insecurities came rushing back, a tidal wave of inadequacy. Her stomach twisted. Julian must have sensed the change in her instantly. "Marie, are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and concerned. She couldn't speak. She could only nod numbly towards the entrance. He followed her gaze. He looked at Liam and Isabella, then back at her. His expression was unreadable, but his hand found hers across the table, his thumb stroking her knuckles reassuringly. Then Liam's eyes swept the room and locked with hers. His smug smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of pure shock. It was followed by confusion, and then something else. Something she couldn't quite decipher. Annoyance? Curiosity. He saw her then, his eyes slid to Julian, taking in his expensive suit, and the effortless confidence with which he occupied this space. Isabella noticed Liam's distraction and followed his line of sight. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. A cool, dismissive smile played on her lips as she looked Marie up and down, her gaze lingering for a moment on her dress, which suddenly felt cheap and unsophisticated. They were seated across the room, but in a direct line of sight. The dinner, which had been so warm and intimate, was now charged with an unbearable tension. She could feel their eyes on them. She tried to focus on Julian, on his voice, but she was hyper-aware of every move they made. After a few minutes, Liam did something she never would have expected. He stood up and started walking towards their table. "Don't let him ruin our evening," Julian said softly, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. "You have nothing to prove to him." Liam arrived at their table, a practiced, charming smile plastered on his face. "Marie, fancy seeing you here. The world is a small place." "Liam?" she said, her voice tight. His eyes flicked to Julian, an unspoken challenge in them. "You must be Marie's new friend." He said the word friend, dripping with condescension. Julian stood up, a gesture of polite respect that somehow also asserted his dominance. He was a few inches taller than Liam, his presence calmer, but infinitely more formidable. "I'm Julian Croft. It's a pleasure." He offered a hand. Liam shook it, his grip a little too firm. "Liam Sterling. I'm Marie's ex-husband." He said it as if it were a title, a claim of ownership. Isabella had now glided over to join him, a vision of icy perfection. "Darling, don't bother them," she said, her voice like honey laced with arsenic. She gave Marie a saccharine smile. "It's so good to see you out and about, Marie. We were worried about you." The insinuation was clear, the poor pathetic ex-wife finally managing to crawl out of her lonely apartment. The rage that simmered inside her was so hot it was almost dizzying. Before she could say anything, Julian spoke, his tone even and cool. "That's very thoughtful of you, but as you can see, she's doing wonderfully." He looked at her, his eyes full of warmth and pride, a stark contrast to the pitying glances she was receiving from the other two. The interaction lasted less than a minute, but it felt like an eternity. They finally retreated to their table, but the damage was done. Her appetite was gone. She felt exposed, judged, and thrown right back into the box Liam had built for her. She looked at Julian, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry, Julian. This is ruined." He shook his head, his expression firm. "Absolutely not. They don't have that power, Marie. Look at me." She met his gaze. "You are the most captivating woman in this room. They are the past. I am your present. Let's not give them another second of our time." He signaled for the waiter, ordered a bottle of their finest champagne, and proceeded to tell her a funny, self-deprecating story about his first failed business venture. He didn't mention Liam or Isabella again. He slowly, masterfully pulled her back from the brink, rebuilding the intimate world they had shattered. But as they left the restaurant hours later, she saw them watching them go. Isabella's face was a mask of polite indifference, but she saw the flicker of something sharp and venomous in her eyes. Liam just looked confused, as if he was seeing a puzzle he couldn't solve. The perfect narrative he had built for his life suddenly had an unexpected variable, and he clearly didn't know what to make of it. The incident at Aria left a strange aftertaste. On one hand, it was humiliating. On the other, Julian's unwavering support had solidified something between them. He hadn't flinched. He had shielded her. It was a kind of partnership she had craved with Liam but never truly received. A few weeks later, Julian approached her with a hesitant look in his eye. "I have a favor to ask, and please feel free to say no," he began. "My company is the primary sponsor for the annual Children's Literacy Gala. It's a big event, very public, and I would be honored if you would accompany me." Her heart leaped into her throat. A public event, cameras, society pages. It was everything she normally avoided. But the thought of standing by Julian's side not as a background player, but as his chosen partner was a powerful lure. "I'd love to," she heard herself say, a new wave of confidence washing over her. The preparations were a whirlwind. Julian insisted on taking care of everything. A stylist he knew, a chic, kind woman named Anja, arrived at her apartment with a rack of breathtaking gowns. She chose a deep sapphire blue creation that shimmered under the light with an elegant cut that made her feel both powerful and feminine. Anja arranged for a hair and makeup artist on the day of the gala. When she was finally ready, she stared at the woman in the mirror. It was her, but it was a version of her she hadn't seen in a decade. The defeated slump was gone from her shoulders. Her eyes, expertly framed, shone with anticipation, not sadness. For the first time, she didn't feel like Marie Sterling's ghost. She felt like Marie Cutrona. Julian's driver picked her up in a sleek black town car. When she arrived at the grand ballroom of the Regent Hotel, Julian was waiting for her just inside the entrance. He was in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, and when he saw her, he actually stopped breathing for a second. "Marie," he whispered, his voice thick with awe, "you are absolutely breathtaking." He took her hand and brought it to his lips, his eyes never leaving hers. In that moment, she felt more cherished than she had in her entire 10-year marriage to Liam. As they entered the ballroom, she finally began to grasp the scale of Julian's life. His small tech company was in fact Nexus Innovations, a global leader in AI and data security. His name wasn't just on the sponsor list, it was on the main banner hanging over the stage. Julian Croft, CEO and founder. People turned as they walked in. Whispers followed them. He wasn't just a guest. He was the gravitational center of the room. Mayors, senators, and rival tech billionaires came over to shake his hand, and he introduced her to each of them with quiet pride. "This is Marie Cutrona." She was nervous, but Julian was a masterful guide, keeping her close, drawing her into conversations, and making her feel completely at ease. She spoke to a city councilwoman about public art initiatives and debated classic literature with a famous novelist. She was holding her own. She was thriving. And then she saw them. Across the room near the silent auction table stood Liam and Isabella. They weren't just guests. They were clearly on the hunt, trying to network their way up the social ladder. Liam was in a rental-looking tuxedo, and Isabella was in a dress that, while expensive, seemed to be trying too hard with its sequins and high slit. They were scanning the crowd, their expressions hungry. Liam saw them first. He froze mid-sentence with some minor executive he was trying to impress. His drink nearly slipped from his hand. He nudged Isabella, who followed his gaze. Her jaw didn't drop. Her composure was too perfect for that. But something more telling happened. The practiced, serene smile she wore vanished, replaced by a cold, hard stare. The mask slipped. For a split second, she saw raw, unadulterated shock and a flash of pure, venomous envy. They watched as the mayor of the city clapped Julian on the back. They watched as a photographer from Vogue approached them and asked for a picture. Julian wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Is this okay?" he murmured. She nodded and they smiled for the camera as the flashbulb popped. That flashbulb was like a starting pistol. The story of the night had just been written. It wasn't about the fundraising goal or the keynote speaker. It was about the unexpected couple tech titan Julian Croft and his stunning, mysterious date. The rest of the evening was a surreal blur. Liam and Isabella tried to pretend they weren't watching them, but she could feel their eyes burning into her back. She saw Isabella force a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. She saw Liam checking his phone, his jaw tight. They were in the same room, but they were in different universes. He had spent years chasing entry into this world, the world of power and influence. And here she was, not just in it, but at its very center, on the arm of a man who didn't just attend the party, he threw it. Later, as Julian was making a gracious and eloquent speech on stage, she scanned the crowd. Her eyes found Liam. He wasn't looking at the stage. He was looking at her. The condescension from the restaurant was gone. The smugness was gone. His face was a complex canvas of confusion, regret, and something that looked terrifyingly like longing. It was the look of a man who had meticulously built a house of cards only to watch a hurricane named Marie Catrona walk into the room. As they left the gala hand in hand, stepping past the velvet ropes into the cool night air, she felt a profound shift in the cosmos. She hadn't sought revenge. She hadn't planned any of this. She had simply started living her own life, and in doing so, she had inadvertently stolen the spotlight they so desperately craved. The perfect facade of Liam and Isabella Sterling to-be had just developed its first undeniable crack. And she knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones it was just the beginning. The morning after the gala, the world was different. Her name was no longer just a name. It was attached to Julian Croft's. The society columns and online gossip sites were buzzing. Tech mogul Julian Croft debuts new love at annual charity gala. There were photos of them everywhere, smiling at the camera, laughing together, his hand resting possessively on her waist. She was no longer the mystery woman. She was Marie Catrona, and suddenly people were interested in who she was. An arts and culture blog dug up the personal portfolio website Julian had encouraged her to create. They ran a feature, More Than a Mogul's Muse, The Stunning Art of Marie Catrona. Within 48 hours, her website traffic exploded. She received emails from galleries, inquiries about commissions, and even an offer from a boutique publisher to illustrate a collection of classic fairy tales. It was a dizzying, terrifying, and exhilarating avalanche of opportunity. Julian was her anchor through it all. "I told you they'd see it," he said, his smile genuine and proud. "This is all you, Marie, your talent. I just opened a door. You're the one flying through it." He helped her navigate the offers, connecting her with a lawyer and an agent to ensure she was making smart decisions. With his guidance, she didn't just feel like an artist. She felt like a business owner. She quit her job at the insurance company, a moment of liberation so sweet it brought tears to her eyes. While her world was expanding, Liam and Isabella's was visibly shrinking. The first call from Liam came 3 days after the gala. She was sketching at her kitchen table, the morning sun streaming in, when his name flashed on her screen. She almost didn't answer, but a morbid curiosity won. "Marie," his voice was strained. "Hi, Liam." I saw the articles, all the photos," he stammered. "Croft, Julian Croft, the CEO of Nexus. How do you even know him?" There was an accusatory tone in his voice, as if she had somehow cheated. "We met," she said simply, offering no details. "This is insane," he continued, his voice rising. "You have to be careful, Marie. A guy like that, they live in a different world. They use people. He's probably just with you for the novelty of it, the quiet artsy type. It's a cliché." The audacity of his concern was breathtaking. He wasn't worried about her. He was trying to tear down what she had to make himself feel better. I appreciate your sudden concern for my welfare, Liam, but I'm fine, she said, her voice cold. I have to go. I'm working on a commission. She hung up before he could respond, her hand trembling slightly, not with fear, but with rage. He couldn't stand it. He couldn't stand that she had found happiness, and not just any happiness, but a life that dwarfed the one he was so proud of. Isabella's reaction was more public, and in a way more pathetic. Her Instagram went into overdrive. She posted a relentless stream of content celebrating her and Liam's perfect love. A long gushing post about their wedding planning with the hashtag Sterling Empire. A series of professionally shot photos of them laughing on a sailboat captioned, "Find someone who is your anchor in any storm." It was all so performative, so desperate. She was shouting into the void, trying to convince the world and perhaps herself that her prize was still the best one. The comments on her posts started to change. Where there used to be fawning praise, there were now subtle jabs. Almost as glamorous as the literacy gala, one person wrote under a photo of their engagement party. Liam's ex is dating Julian Croft, you know. Another commented. She would delete them, but more would pop up. The story was out, and her curated narrative was losing its power. The real shift came during a lunch with Chloe. They were at an outdoor cafe when she slid her phone across the table. "You need to see this." It was a post from a well-known local gossip columnist. The headline read, "Sterling Thorne wedding plans hit a snag, fiancé's ex moves on and up." The article detailed Liam's modest career in finance compared to Julian's stratospheric success. It painted Isabella as a driven but local player, while Marie was now being linked to global philanthropy and the tech elite. The most damning line was near the end. One has to wonder if Mr. Sterling is having second thoughts. It seems the woman he deemed too comfortable has found a life that is anything but. "Ouch," Chloe said, sipping her iced tea. "That's got to sting." It was brutal, and a part of her, the part that had cried on her apartment floor, felt a grim sense of satisfaction. But it was fleeting. Her happiness with Julian, her burgeoning career that was real. Their drama was just noise, a fading echo from a life she no longer lived. A few weeks later, she got a frantic, tearful call from an old mutual friend, Jessica, who was one of Isabella's bridesmaids. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she whispered into the phone, "but they are fighting. All the time. Liam is obsessed. He is constantly talking about you, about Croft. He checks the news, the blogs. Isabella is losing her mind. She threw a $5,000 vase at the wall last night. She keeps saying you're doing this to ruin her life." The perfect couple was imploding. The empire was crumbling before it was even built. The pressure of maintaining the facade, now that it had a glaring point of comparison, was proving to be too much. Liam hadn't just been content to have the better life. He needed everyone to know it. Now, by every conceivable public metric, he didn't. And it was destroying them. Her quiet success had become their public failure. The wedding was 6 weeks away. According to the society pages that were now, ironically, her source of information on her ex-husband's life, the Sterling Thorne wedding was set to be the event of the season. Isabella had booked the most prestigious country club, hired a celebrity wedding planner, and had reportedly commissioned a custom gown from a famous designer. It was a full-scale production designed to scream success and perfection from the rooftops. But behind the scenes, the cracks were turning into chasms. Liam's attempts to contact her grew more frequent and more desperate. He sent texts late at night. "Are you happy? And he doesn't know you like I do." She ignored them all, blocking his number after he sent a rambling, wine-fueled email reminiscing about their simple, real life together. Her life with Julian was anything but simple, yet it was more real than anything she'd known. They traveled. He took her to a conference in Kyoto where they spent their free time exploring ancient temples. They spent a weekend at his quiet modern cabin by a lake where they talked for hours, and she filled a sketchbook with drawings of the landscape. He celebrated every one of her successes. When she signed the contract to illustrate the fairy tale collection, he opened a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon and toasted to the brilliant Marie Cutrona, who is finally showing the world what I saw in the library that day. He never once asked about Liam. He never made her feel like she had baggage. He simply loved her for who she was right now. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, her doorman buzzed. "Mr. Cutrona is here to see you." "I'm sorry, who?" "He says he's your brother, Mr. Sterling." Her blood turned to ice. Liam. He had lied to get past security. "Do not let him up," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "He's already on his way up, Ms. Cutrona. He rushed past me." A moment later, there was a frantic pounding on her apartment door. "Marie, please, we need to talk, just for 5 minutes." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She thought about calling security, about calling Julian. But another part of her, a part that needed closure, wanted to face this head on. She took a deep breath, straightened her spine, and opened the door. He looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was disheveled. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his expensive suit was rumpled. The smug confidence was gone, replaced by a raw, wild-eyed desperation. "What do you want, Liam?" she asked, her voice as steady as she could make it, blocking the doorway with her body. I needed to see you," he said, his eyes scanning her apartment, which was now filled with art supplies, proofs for her book, and a beautiful bouquet of lilies Julian had sent that morning. "This whole thing, it's a sham." "I'm not sure what you're talking about." "This," he gestured wildly. "Her. The wedding. Isabella. It's all for show. It's a performance, Marie. Every single day. We talk about brand synergy and our 5-year plan. We don't talk about us. There is no us. It's just a merger." She stared at him unmoved. "You chose this life, Liam. You told me it was what you always wanted. An empire, remember." "I was an idiot," he burst out, his voice cracking. "I was a fool who didn't know what he had. I had a real life with you, a real partnership. I threw it away for this, for a woman who checks her stock portfolio before she kisses me good morning, a woman who is more concerned with the guest list than with me." He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. "I made a mistake, Marie, a terrible, life-ruining mistake. She isn't perfect. She's hollow. And seeing you happy, successful, seeing you with him, it just made me realize what I lost." It was the confession she had once dreamed of hearing, the ultimate validation. But hearing it now, she felt nothing but a profound, weary pity. He hadn't come here because he loved her. He had come here because his new toy was broken, and her new life made his look cheap. Her happiness was a mirror reflecting his own failure, and he couldn't stand the sight of it. "There's nothing left to say, Liam," she said quietly. "You made your choice. I've made mine." "No, don't say that," he whispered, reaching for her. He tried to cup her face in his hands, his thumb brushing her cheek. The gesture, once so familiar, felt alien and repulsive. In his eyes she saw the ghost of the man she once loved, now twisted by envy and regret. "We can fix this. It's not too late. Call off the wedding. I'll leave her tonight. We can go back." "Go back to what?" she said, pulling away, her voice finally rising. "To the woman you thought was too small for you. The woman you left because she wasn't ambitious enough. You don't want me, Liam. You want what I have. You can't stand that I built a better life after you burned ours to the ground. You're not in love with me. You're in love with the idea of winning." His face crumpled. The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. He saw it then, his own pathetic, ego-driven heart laid bare. He tried one last desperate gambit. He lunged forward and tried to kiss her. She turned her head and his lips met her cheek. She pushed him back hard. "Get out," she hissed, her voice trembling with a final cleansing rage. "Get out of my home and out of my life. For good." He stumbled back defeated. The last of his fight seemed to drain out of him, leaving an empty, pathetic shell. He gave her one last haunted look and then turned and walked away. His shoulders slumped. She shut the door, locked it, and leaned against it, her body shaking. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was the definitive final closing of a chapter. He hadn't just been her ex-husband. He had been a ghost haunting her every step, and she had finally decisively exorcised him. The last cord had been cut. She was completely and utterly free. The day of Liam and Isabella's wedding arrived on the wings of a brilliantly sunny, crisp autumn Saturday. It was the kind of day photographers dream of, where the light is golden and the sky is an impossible cloudless blue. Her phone, which she'd intentionally left on the kitchen counter, buzzed with a relentless rhythm. She knew without looking that it was the digital world announcing the nuptials. Curiosity, that old familiar ghost, finally beckoned her over. Her social media feeds were an inescapable shrine to the Sterling-Thorne union. A prominent lifestyle magazine granted exclusive access was flooding the internet with a meticulously curated play-by-play. The first image was a drone shot of the Oak Ridge Country Club, its manicured lawns sprawling like a green carpet, the grand white clubhouse looking like a modern-day palace. Then came the detail shots, a towering ice sculpture of their intertwined initials, L and I, already beginning to weep in the sun. The 10-tier wedding cake, a monument of white fondant and sugar flowers. Close-ups of the calligraphed menus and the champagne flutes, each etched with the wedding date. And then there was Isabella. A series of photos showed her in her custom gown, a severe architectural creation that was more of a statement than a celebration. She looked flawless, her raven hair pulled back into a chignon so tight it seemed painful, her makeup a mask of perfection. But in every photograph, even the ones where she was smiling, her eyes held a brittle, high-stakes tension. She was a CEO closing the most important deal of her life. Finally, a photo of the happy couple moments after the ceremony. They stood under a massive arch of white roses, Liam in his bespoke tuxedo, Isabella holding his arm. They were smiling for the camera, a perfectly composed portrait of success. But she saw what the camera tried to hide. She saw the faint, tight line of Liam's jaw, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He looked less like a groom and more like a man who had just signed a contract with punishingly high terms. They were a picture of perfection, but the picture was hollow. There was no joy in it, only the grim satisfaction of an objective achieved. A strange sort of peace settled over her as she set the phone back down. There was no sting of jealousy, no pang of regret. There was only the quiet clinical observation of a life she had so thoroughly and gratefully escaped. Just then the doorbell rang. It was Julian, dressed not in a suit but in comfortable jeans and a soft cashmere sweater, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled at her. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked. He didn't know the date's significance to her past, and she felt a surge of gratitude for that. To him it was just a beautiful Saturday, a day for them. He led her not to his sleek town car, but to a beautifully restored vintage Land Rover, its forest green paint gleaming in the sun. As they drove, leaving the city and its digital noise in the rearview mirror, a tangible sense of relief washed over her. The further they went, the more the concrete towers gave way to rolling hills painted in the fiery colors of fall. They didn't listen to the radio. They just talked about her book illustrations, about a funny problem his programmers were trying to solve, about the simple, profound joy of a perfect cup of coffee. It was effortless. It was real. 2 hours later, they pulled up to the trailhead of a path she knew by heart. It was where he had taken her for their first real date outside the city, a quiet, winding trail that he loved. They'd hiked for miles that day, talking about everything and nothing, and she had felt the first true thaw of the ice that had encased her heart for so long. Now they began the ascent again, their steps falling into an easy, familiar rhythm. The air was clean and scented with pine and damp earth, a world away from the cloying perfume of 1,000 white roses. They walked mostly in a comfortable silence, their hands intertwined. His thumb stroked the back of her hand, a small, constant reassurance. This was their ceremony, their sacred space. When they finally reached the lookout point, the view stole her breath just as it had the first time. The entire valley stretched out below them, a breathtaking tapestry of red gold and deep orange, the sun casting long shadows that shifted and danced. They sat on a large flat rock warmed by the afternoon sun, the same one they'd sat on months ago. For a few minutes they just watched the world quiet and still. Then Julian turned to her, his expression shifting, his gaze becoming more intense. His hazel eyes were serious, but they held a universe of deep, unwavering affection. "Marie," he began, his voice a little thicker than usual. "I have stood on stages and spoken to thousands of people. I have sat in boardrooms where the fate of billion-dollar deals rested on my next word. But I have to tell you, I have never in my life been as nervous as I am right at this moment." He took both of her hands in his grip warm and firm. "The first time I saw you in that dusty corner of the library, you were so completely lost in your art that the rest of the world had simply ceased to exist for you. I thought it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. And as I've gotten to know you, I've realized that's the essence of who you are. You see the truth and the beauty in things, and you have this incredible gift for capturing it. And somewhere along the way, you captured me, completely and irrevocably." Her heart was no longer beating. It was soaring. She could feel tears welling in her eyes, blurring the spectacular view into a kaleidoscope of autumn color. "I don't have a picturesque cliffside in Positano," he continued, a small self-deprecating smile on his lips. "And I didn't hire a photographer to hide in the bushes. All I have is this place which feels like ours. And I have a question I've been wanting to ask you for a very long time." He released one of her hands and reached into the pocket of his jacket, pulling out a small, unassuming velvet box. Her breath caught in her throat. He opened it, and her tears finally spilled over. Inside was not the monstrous, blinding diamond that screamed for attention from Isabella's finger. It was a stunning antique-style ring, intricate and unique. A deep blue sapphire, her favorite stone, a color he remembered her admiring in a painting once, rested between two small, sparkling, ethically sourced diamonds on a hand-carved platinum band that looked like intertwined vines. It was a work of art. It was perfectly, wonderfully her. "Marie Catrona," he said, his voice now thick with emotion, his gaze locked with hers. "You are the most brilliant, kind, compassionate, and resilient person I have ever known. You didn't just let me into your life. You taught me what a real partnership is supposed to feel like. Will you marry me?" The word came out on a sob, a whisper of pure, unadulterated joy. "Yes," she managed to say, her voice choked. "Yes, of course, yes." He let out a shaky breath of relief and slid the ring under her finger. It fit as if it were forged for her. He drew her in and kissed her, a long, deep kiss, filled with promises, with relief, and with the profound, grounding sense of coming home. In that moment, with no audience but the vast sky and the silent ancient trees, she felt richer than she could ever have imagined. Later that evening they were curled up on the sofa in her apartment, which now felt definitively like their apartment. They had ordered pizza, their favorite kind, with extra garlic, and were drinking champagne not from delicate flutes but from regular water glasses. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a notification for the magazine article now published, "A Sterling Affair Inside the Society Wedding of the Year." She tapped on it. The gallery was filled with dozens of glossy, hyper-perfect photographs. Liam and Isabella cutting the cake with a ceremonial saber. Liam and Isabella in a painfully staged embrace on the dance floor. Liam and Isabella smiling, always smiling for the unseen audience. Then she closed the article and opened her own camera roll. There was only one new picture from today. It was a selfie Julian had insisted they take at the Lookout after she'd said yes. It was messy and imperfect. Her hair was windblown, her cheeks were flushed from the hike, and her eyes were still puffy from happy tears. Julian was grinning, a genuine, uninhibited grin that lit up his whole face. And there on her hand, which rested on his chest, her beautiful, unique sapphire ring caught the afternoon light. She looked at their gallery of sterile perfection, then back at their single, blurry, joyful image. The contrast was so stark, it was almost laughable. Liam had chased his empire, and he had finally gotten it a wedding that was a media event, a wife who was a strategic partner, a life that was a performance. It was a victory measured in headlines and guest lists. She had simply turned her back on all of that and chased her own quiet happiness. And in doing so, she had found a kingdom. Her victory wasn't loud. It wasn't about revenge or stealing a spotlight. It was the quiet, profound, and undeniable truth that settled in her soul as she leaned her head on her future husband's shoulder. Some people spend their entire lives building a beautiful facade for the world to admire, while the lucky ones get to build a real messy, breathtaking life hidden in plain sight. And so Marie's story isn't really about an ex-wife stealing the spotlight. It's about a woman who stopped looking at the spotlight altogether and created her own light so bright and so authentic that others couldn't help but be drawn to it. It teaches us a powerful lesson. Your value is never determined by the person who leaves you. True success isn't about proving your worth to someone from your past. It's about building a future where they no longer matter. Marie's journey from a heartbroken ghost in her own life to the architect of a beautiful new one is a testament to the power of self-worth and the idea that the best revenge is and always will be a life well lived. What did you think of Marie's incredible transformation? Have you ever seen someone's life take a turn that left everyone speechless? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love stories about justice, resilience, and getting the last laugh, make sure you hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more real-life drama.